The Ghost Empire, the Knights of the Golden Circle. The map, the myth, and the Masonic darkness. The Circle of Blood. Imagine a map of the Western Hemisphere in the year 1854. Now, imagine a giant golden compass placed directly on the city of Havana, Cuba. The needle swings in a perfect radius of 2,400 miles. This circle doesn't care about borders. It cuts through the American South, sweeps across Mexico, devours Central America, and swallows the West Indies. To the average citizen, this was just geography. But to a secret cabal of men meeting in the shadows of Cincinnati and New Orleans, this was the blueprint for a new world order. They called it the Golden Circle. And they called themselves the Knights. Their goal was simple, yet terrifyingly ambitious: to carve out a slave-holding empire that would control the world's supply of sugar, tobacco, and cotton. An empire so powerful it would rival the British Crown and the United States government combined. But this wasn't just a political movement. It was a ghost empire, a secret society built on the bones of Freemasonry, fueled by stolen gold, and protected by a code of silence that carried a death penalty. George Bickley and the Birth of the Shadows. Every legend has a face, and for the KGC, that face belonged to George W.L. Bickley, a man who claimed to be a doctor, a scholar, and a visionary. In reality, he was a master manipulator. In 1854, Bickley didn't just want to start a club, he wanted to create an invisible army. He modeled the Knights of the Golden Circle after the most elite secret societies of Europe. It was a tiered system designed to protect the high command at all costs. The First Degree. These were the boots on the ground, the Knights of the Iron Helmet. Most didn't even know who they were working for. They only knew they had to be ready to fight. The Second Degree. The Knights of the True Faith. These were the bankers, the merchants, and the lawyers. Their job was to fund the revolution and launder the money. The Third Degree. Political. The Knights of the Columbian Star. These were the men in Washington, D.C., the senators, the generals, and the advisors to the president. This structure made the KGC a deep state entity before the term even existed. By the time the American Civil War was brewing, the KGC had over 15,000 members across the North and South. They were a virus in the bloodstream of the Republic, waiting for the signal to strike. The Antiquitech connection, the hidden energy. Now, here is where the history books go quiet. The KGC wasn't just interested in land and slaves. They were obsessed with the remnants of the old world. Throughout the southern United States and Mexico, there are thousands of ancient mounds, star forts, and megalithic structures. Bickley and the high-ranking knights believed these sites were nodes of power, Antiquitech, remnants of a previous civilization. They built their castles, local chapters, directly on these ley lines. Why? Because they knew that whoever controlled the geography of the old world controlled the frequency of the new world. They used these sites as secret depots for weapons and, more importantly, for their vast reserves of gold. They believed that by encircling the Gulf of Mexico, they were reclaiming a sacred stargate of the Tartarian Empire. This wasn't just about cotton, it was about a global energy monopoly. The Baltimore Plot, assassinating the tall man. February 1861. Abraham Lincoln is on a train journey to his inauguration. He is a man the KGC hates with a burning passion. To them, Lincoln was the grand destroyer of their Golden Circle. The KGC castle in Baltimore was tasked with a dark mission, the assassination of the president-elect before he even took the oath. They planned to create a riot at the train station, and in the chaos, a KGC Knight of the Iron Helmet would step out of the shadows and put a bullet in Lincoln's head. But the KGC made a fatal mistake. They underestimated Allan Pinkerton. The founder of the Pinkerton Detective Agency had his own spies inside the KGC. He discovered the plot and forced Lincoln to travel in disguise, wearing a soft hat and a long cloak, slipping through Baltimore like a thief in the night. Lincoln survived the Baltimore Plot, but the KGC had sent a message. The war hadn't even started, and the ghosts were already at the door. This wasn't a war between states. It was a war between a president and a secret empire that refused to be seen. The Copperheads, treason in the North. As the Civil War erupted, the KGC moved their operations underground in the north. They were known as the Copperheads, poisonous snakes hiding in the grass of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Their goal was to sabotage the Union from within. They burned bridges, cut telegraph lines, and staged massive riots to stop the military draft. They were funded by KGC gold, smuggled from the South. But here is the most chilling part. The KGC had members sitting in Lincoln's own cabinet. They were reading his mail, listening to his strategies, and leaking them back to the Confederate High Command. Washington, D.C. was a nest of vipers. Every time the Union suffered a surprising defeat, the fingerprints of the KGC were on the blueprints. They were playing a game of inverse warfare, destroying the Union's will to fight while preparing for a great reset of their own. The Redemption Fund, stolen gold and blood. By 1864, the South was losing. The Golden Circle was shrinking. But George Bickley and the KGC leaders didn't panic. They realized that the First Civil War might be lost, but the Long War was just beginning. They initiated a plan called the Redemption Fund. They systematically raided the Confederate treasury. They hijacked Union gold shipments. They robbed banks across the border states. This wasn't just for greed. It was a strategic war chest for a future insurgency. Legend says that millions, perhaps billions, in gold bars and silver coins were buried in a series of castles or hidden vaults across the Ozarks, the deserts of New Mexico, and the hills of Georgia. These weren't just holes in the ground. They were engineered vaults with booby traps, mechanical sensors, and lethal poisons. The KGC appointed Sentinels members whose only job for the next 50 years would be to guard these sites, and the man they chose to be their high-level collector? A young, cold-blooded guerrilla fighter who would become the most famous outlaw in American history, Jesse James. The outlaw sentinel, Jesse James, was a spy. Ask any American schoolchild who Jesse James was, and they'll tell you, a Robin Hood of the Old West, a train robber, a cold-blooded killer, but they are only telling you the cover story. In the secret archives of the KGC, Jesse James held a much higher rank. He wasn't robbing banks for personal greed. He was a high-level sentinel. Every stagecoach he hit, every Union bank he emptied, and every train he derailed was a targeted tax collection for the KGC's Second Civil War Fund. Jesse James was trained by Quantrill's Raiders, a brutal guerrilla unit that operated as a paramilitary wing of the Knights of the Golden Circle. When the war officially ended in 1865, the KGC didn't surrender. They went into sleeper cell mode. Jesse James was their primary fundraiser. Historians have long wondered, where did all that stolen money go? Jesse didn't live like a rich man. He lived like a man on the run. The answer? He was delivering the gold to secret castles, underground vaults across the Ozarks and the Superstition Mountains. He was the sentinel, guarding the billions in gold that the KGC planned to use to buy an army of 100 mercenaries to retake the South. If you look at his robberies, they align perfectly with the ley lines of KGC treasure maps. He wasn't a bandit, he was an operative. The Hoot Owl trees, decoding the landscape. If you walk through the forests of Arkansas, Oklahoma, or Texas today, you might see something strange. An old oak tree with a branch bent at a perfect 90-degree angle. A rock carved with a strange snake symbol or a turtle pointing toward a creek. Mainstream hikers call these curiosities. The KGC called them templates. The Knights didn't just bury gold in a hole and hope for the best. They used a sophisticated system of terrestrial geometry. They carved Hoot Owl symbols into trees. If the owl's eyes were level, the treasure was far. If one eye was higher than the other, you were standing on the threshold. They used shadow signs. At a specific time of day, usually the summer solstice, the shadow of a specific rock would point directly to the entrance of a KGC castle. These vaults were built with Antiquitech precision. They used acid traps, collapsing ceilings, and even water booby traps that would flood the tunnel the moment you moved a specific stone. The KGC gold wasn't meant for one man. It was meant for the resurrection. And the map to that gold is written in a language that the government is terrified you will learn to read. This is why the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, has so many restricted zones in the West. They aren't protecting the environment. They are guarding the KGC's war chest. The killing of a king, the Booth connection. The 14th of April, 1865. Ford's Theater. John Wilkes Booth jumps from the balcony after shooting Abraham Lincoln. To the public, he was a crazed actor. To the Secret Service of the time, he was an operative of the Knights of the Golden Circle. Booth wasn't acting alone. He was part of a KGC assassination cell. The original plan wasn't just to kill Lincoln, it was to decapitate the entire US government. On that same night, KGC assassins were sent to kill the Vice President and the Secretary of State. Why? Because the KGC realized that Lincoln was going to implement a greenback currency system that would destroy the KGC's plan to control the American economy through gold. Lincoln was a threat to the financial circle. Booth had spent months meeting with KGC leaders in Montreal, Canada, the northern hub of the Golden Circle. He was funded with KGC money. He used a KGC safe house network to plan his escape. Even the man who allegedly killed Booth in a burning barn, Boston Corbett, is suspected of being a KGC cleaner sent to silence Booth before he could testify about the High Knights in Washington. Who ordered the hit? The Lincoln assassination was the KGC's ultimate double cross. The bloodline of the circle. The KGC didn't just use gold and guns. They used bloodlines. Many of the founding members of the KGC were high-ranking Freemasons and members of the Order of the Cincinnati. They believed in a natural aristocracy. They saw themselves as the princes of the Pete. New World. They practiced rituals that would make your skin crawl. Deep inside their castles, they swore oaths of blood and iron. If a member betrayed the circle, his tongue would be cut out, and his body would be left as a sign for others. But they also practiced dynastic politics. They married into the wealthiest families of the North. They sent their sons to Yale and Harvard. They created a permanent shadow government. While the Civil War was fought by poor farmers on both sides, the KGC elite were sitting in mansions, sipping brandy, and deciding how the new America would be managed. They were the architects of the Gilded Age, an era of massive wealth for the few, built on the stolen labor and stolen gold of the many. The Great Reset of 1871. By 1871, the KGC realized they couldn't win back the South through open warfare, so they moved into the legal circle. This is the year of the District of Columbia Organic Act, the year the United States was corporatized. Many truth-tellers believe the KGC was the driving force behind this transition. By turning the US government into a private corporation, the KGC could control it through debt. They used their redemption fund, the buried gold of the Confederacy, to back the new corporate bonds. They didn't need to fly the Stars and Bars flag anymore. They just needed to own the bank that owned the flag. This was the Great Reset of the 19th century. They shifted the war from the battlefield to the boardroom. The Golden Circle wasn't a territory anymore. It was a global financial loop, and we are still trapped inside it. The Dark Prophet, Albert Pike, and the KGC Corps. To understand the soul of the Knights of the Golden Circle, you have to look at the man who was often called the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite, Albert Pike. Pike wasn't just a Confederate general. He was the philosophical architect of the KGC's long-term strategy. While the soldiers were fighting for land, Pike was writing about a 3-world war plan to bring about a new world order. Many researchers believe that the KGC was the action wing of Pike's grand design. Pike understood that gold was the only true weapon. He helped design the KGC's insurance policy, the massive burying of treasure across the 33rd parallel of the United States. He knew that the North might win the battle, but the Golden Circle would win the century by controlling the currency. The KGC wasn't a failed rebellion. It was a successful financial transition. Pike's letters suggest that the KGC's gold was intended to fund a series of global shocks that would force nations to surrender their sovereignty to a central banking authority. The modern Sentinels. Who is guarding the gold? You might ask, if there are billions in gold buried in the Ozarks or the New Mexico desert, why hasn't someone just dug it up? The answer is as chilling as it is simple. The Sentinels are still there. They are no longer men on horseback with 6-shooters. Today, the KGC's castles are often located on private property, owned by shell companies with links to major defense contractors and the world's most powerful banks. Some researchers believe that groups like Blackwater, now Academy, or private security firms are the modern Knights of the Iron Helmet, hired to protect these strategic reserves. There are stories of modern treasure hunters who have tracked KGC Hoot Owl signs to remote areas, only to find themselves being followed by unmarked black SUVs or chased away by low-flying helicopters. In 2018, the FBI conducted a massive, secret excavation at Dents Run, Pennsylvania, looking for a lost Civil War gold shipment. They claimed they found nothing, but locals reported seeing armored trucks leaving the site in the middle of the night. The government isn't looking for history. They are reclaiming KGC assets. The Jesse James DNA, a family tradition. The James Younger gang didn't just disappear. Their bloodline survived, and with them, the oral tradition of the KGC. Descendants of Jesse James, like Bob Brewer, have spent their lives decoding the templates left by their ancestors. In his book, Shadow of the Sentinel, Brewer describes finding turtle rocks and snake carvings that led to actual caches of KGC coins and gold bars. But Brewer also warns of the death traps. The KGC used Antiquitech knowledge of hydraulics and air pressure. Some vaults were designed to flood with water from nearby springs the moment a keystone was removed. Others contained jars of cyanide gas that would break if the door was forced open. This wasn't the work of simple outlaws. This was the work of engineers who understood that the gold must remain in the dark until the master key was presented. Jesse James wasn't a criminal. He was a librarian of gold, and his descendants are the keepers of the index. From KGC to the Federal Reserve, the ultimate loop. This is the final boss of the KGC rabbit hole. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Many truth-tellers point out that the families who backed the KGC in the 1860s, the Morgans, the Rockefellers, and the Rothschild-linked agents were the same families who gathered at Jekyll Island to create the Fed. The Confederate gold that Jesse James and the KGC buried wasn't just sitting there doing nothing. It was used as off-ledger collateral to back the private banks that eventually took over the U.S. Treasury. By hiding the gold, they created a scarcity that allowed them to implement a debt-based fiat system. The Golden Circle is no longer a map of the Caribbean. It is the circle of debt that every American citizen is born into. We pay interest to a private corporation, the Fed, that uses ghost gold from the KGC era as its ultimate backstop. The Civil War didn't end with a surrender at Appomattox. It ended with the total capture of the American dollar by the knights of the high finance world, breaking the circle, the final wake-up call. So, why are we telling you this now? Because the Golden Circle only works as long as it is invisible. As long as you believe history is just a series of random events and bad luck, they win. But once you see the patterns, the Hoot Owl signs in the laws, the sentinel behavior of the media, and the stolen gold in the banking system, the circle begins to break. The Knights of the Golden Circle relied on your ignorance. They relied on you thinking that Jesse James was just a cool outlaw and that Albert Pike was just a dead general. They wanted you to focus on the red versus blue of the Civil War, while they ran off with the gold and the blueprints for the future. The war for the American soul isn't over. It's just moving into a new phase. We are the descendants of those who were reset in the 1800s. We are the ones who were given a fake history to keep us from finding our true inheritance. The gold is real. The secrets are real. And the power to reclaim it starts with a refusal to be part of their circle any longer.